It's a high-stress job that pays nothing and can exact a high price both emotionally and physically. The work of a frontline caregiver is a labor of love, but it also amounts to an estimated $600 million in unpaid work each year. I'm joined now by Linda Levin CEO of ElderSource, to talk about a federal tax credit that could offer some relief.
That's right.
Thanks for being here, Linda. Appreciate you being here. For our listeners, we may have a slightly shorter show today because we're going to be joining NPR's live coverage of oral arguments before the U.S. Supreme Court on whether former President Trump is disqualified from running for office. So just be aware that we will turn to that when that comes to us live. But first, Linda, there are a lot of reasons that people step into the role of primary caregiver. What are some of them? What are some of the reasons that people shoulder that burden?
Well, mostly love for their parent, for their sibling, for their spouse. It's a natural role that people take on that they don't really identify necessarily as caregiver. They may identify as wife or husband or daughter or son, but often it's financial. Their loved one is getting older and frailer and needs some additional support, and so they will step in and help with that.
And so this can be something that is a result of aging, but it can also be the result of an illness or an accident or some sort of, birth issue, like a defect or something that you're born with that makes it hard for you to function in ways that you need assistance.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about aging. Of course, we think of older adults needing caregivers, but people living with disabilities or, like you said, even an accident, they suddenly need someone to care for them and support them.
And so this is often because people want to be able to keep their loved one in a place where they're comfortable rather than putting them in some place maybe that they would be cared for elsewhere, or very often they can't afford that kind of care.
Right. I mean, I haven't met anybody yet who wants to go into a nursing home or a long-term care facility. They want to be cared for at home. They're comfortable in their home. They know their home. And that's where they want to stay and stay as independent as possible. So caregivers make that possible.
Right. And they do everything from assisting with administering medication. They do bill paying. They do doctor's appointments, taking people back and forth. There's really a lot of responsibilities that you can accrue as a primary caregiver.
There is a lot, and it varies. It depends on the person's needs and the caregiver's ability to help. And this is where people don't necessarily identify themselves as caregivers. When they need to take someone to an appointment, they're being a caregiver. When they're helping to pay bills, they're being a caregiver. They're supporting somebody. They may be preparing meals. They may be making home modifications. They may be paying for some support to come into the home and help somebody.
And so there is, in addition to the time, there is real out-of-pocket costs that come with that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's medications, as you mentioned. Sometimes they have to pay for the medications. They may have to purchase consumable medical supplies, which are very expensive and may not be covered by insurance. They may have to make home modifications, like install grab bars, and pay for those types of things, or even pay for supportive services like respite care to come into the home.
So we're talking about the cost and stresses of being a caregiver. Are you providing essential care for a loved one? What kind of help do you need? We want to hear from you. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org and reach out on social media if you are on Facebook or Instagram. You can also tag us on X at FCC On Air. Linda, the frontline caregivers they're not taking on this role and also not working full-time or not working part-time. It's not as if having those responsibilities somehow liberates you from all of the other things that you have to do, including earning a living.
Absolutely. So many caregivers are what we call sandwich generation, where they are taking care of their parent and also their children. They don't stop being parents themselves, and they're in that situation. They are also working. They're in the workforce. I'm a caregiver to a degree. We have people who work for me who are caregivers, whether it's for a child or a parent or a grandparent. Life doesn't stop, and it can be costly, and it is hard to juggle.
So let's talk about this possibility of some federal assistance for people who are in this role. Is there anything currently available?
There are supportive services available for caregivers. There are several federal programs and state-funded programs that, in fact, we manage, that we get from the Administration for Community Living and the Department of Elder Affairs.
You at ElderSource.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And we fund programs and services in the community that help older adults and their caregivers stay at home and stay independent as much as possible and delay and even prevent having to go into a long-term care facility. So there are services available. There is one program that we manage that does provide a subsidy, but you have to be low income and you have to be a 24-hour caregiver. So there's not another program that I'm familiar with that provides any type of other financial support to caregivers, and in this case, working caregivers who need to stay in the workforce.
Right. So this federal legislation, there is some federal legislation pending, being discussed. Tell me a little bit about what that would do and where it is in the process.
So it is the Credit for Caring Act. It is bipartisan, which is nice because aging should not be a partisan issue. It is a bipartisan issue. Being a caregiver is bipartisan. Everyone is experiencing it. It has taken some time for this bill to get to this point. It is being introduced. I don't believe it's been shared out fully yet to the full Congress. So there is still a road ahead, but this is the farthest this bill has come, is my understanding, and it will provide a tax credit for working caregivers up to, I think it's about $7,000 after, it's $5,000 after the first $2,000 that they may put out.
Explain that a little bit more. 5,000 beyond, like if you've spent 2,000.
If you spent the $2,000, then you would get up to $5,000 in tax credit for verifiable expenses.
And what constitutes a verifiable expense? I mean, I could see if you're asking for reimbursement for medications that you purchased, but in terms of time spent, is that something that's quantifiable? Is that something that the bill addresses?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen the full bill. I know that there are expenses that the caregiver does incur, like you said, medications. It could be supplies, purchases, things that they can certainly verify and report in order to get a tax credit. I'm not sure how the time spent would help be recorded and tracked, but that's to be seen.
And so what are there some numbers on what people are typically spending when they're in this role, kind of how much it costs?
Well, the number I've seen on average is a little over $7,000 annually. I believe in many cases it could be significantly more than that, depending on the need of the person they're caring for. But it can also be, just medications that the loved one needs help paying for, or like I said, those supplies or installation of devices, which are lower cost. So it does vary, but I understand that's around the average.
So how important do you think this would be in terms of helping people who are in the role of caregiver? Is this something that would be significant for them?
Oh, I think so. When you have to incur these costs, it puts a burden on those families to do their duty as a caregiver, and it can affect them at work as well. And if they're leaving the workforce to become a caregiver, or they're reducing their hours so that they can provide caregiver, they're having that financial impact. So any financial assistance and support that these folks could get definitely will have an impact.
So what do you hear about need in the community? I mean, in the role that you serve, what stories do you hear from people about what circumstances they're facing financially or otherwise?
So we do hear caregivers having to leave the workforce or change their work hours, go part-time so that they can provide more caregiving. There's not enough support in the community for the number of people that are aging and the number of people that are becoming caregivers. This is going to become a growing problem. So more support that we could give caregivers to stay as caregivers, providing services to them, like the ones we fund, and providing them financial income so that they could stay in place and continue the caregiving. We're seeing more demand on caregivers and more caregivers out there who need us.
I mean, it does seem, when you get to an age where you have, parents or in-laws or whatever that are maybe, at a stage that they are considering what to do next. And obviously a home setting is really the best, I think, for people's psychological state and their emotional well-being. But the cost of putting someone in a place to live is really just seems almost prohibitively expensive for anyone.
Oh, long-term care is very expensive. It could be $90,000 annually or more, and you're going to spend down very quickly. You'll end up on federal benefits to try to support that care in the facility. So it's very expensive, both to the family, but also to the government to pay for that kind of care. It's definitely better and healthier to keep people at home as long as possible and to save those resources as much as possible to provide the care in the home. It's better for everybody. So this bill is a very important bill to in the process of helping folks.
It is one thing that could help. Is it surprising to you? Was it surprising to you when you kind of got into this particular line of work, how few resources there are, or what need there is for end of life or elder services for people and for families taking care of them?
Yeah, so I started working for area agencies on aging over 30 years ago now. Can't believe it. And I've been here now for 20 years. And we knew this was coming. We knew people were aging, boomers were aging, and there would be this increase in need. I think we were hoping there would be more available to help. And there's always going to be more. There definitely is going to be more in the near future for these services and for funding for these programs that support them. The government needs to support these caregivers because they can't afford to not.
And when you say there's going to be more of a need, I mean, anecdotally, it seems like I hear more about, dementia in older, but not necessarily old adults. Is that actually becoming more of a problem? Or are you just sort of talking about, boomers aging and that's where that growth would be coming from?
It's coming from a variety of places, right? So the longer you live, the greater chance you have of getting dementia. People are definitely living longer, right? I remember when they used to announce on the Weather Channel or the Weather News, about, we have a centenarian. They've stopped making those announcements because there's so many living to 100 now. So you just have more people aging and living longer, and you have this boom of people aging. So you have both things happening where more people are aging and the people who are aging are living that much longer. And so have more need, becoming more frail necessarily near the end of life and need that support.
So what would you advise people if they support this measure? Is there something that they can do to get involved in and advocate for this tax credit, this proposed tax credit?
Absolutely. If people like this bill and want to see it pass, it's always good to make those calls to your legislators, to your members of Congress. Let them know that you support this bill. And if you're a caregiver, share your story. Let them know how this will help you. Call them, write them, email them. There's so many ways that you could reach out and advocate.
And in terms of the resources that ElderSource provides that do exist, how can people access those?
Well, there's two ways. They can go to our website, which is myeldersource.org. There are phone numbers there. There's actually resources on the website itself targeted to caregivers as well as just older adults in general and people with disabilities. There is a chat feature on that website as well if they just want to chat with somebody. And they can call our toll-free number, which is 1-888-242-4464.
Well, Linda Lanier, thank you so much for being here and telling us about this. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.